Hi, welcome to this video on the English vowel system. So today we're going to do a very brief recap of the vocal tract and then take you through a little bit of theory, a little bit of physics when it comes to sound waves and frequencies and that kind of thing. And then through what I hope is an accessible and memorable introduction to the British English, standard Southern British-ish vowel system. Like with the last sort of theory-heavy video that I did on consonants, the aim of the game is not for you to memorize everything in this video, but for you to gain a better background understanding of why you might be pronouncing certain vowel sounds wrong and what you can do to fix that. Okay, so the vocal tract. So all vowels in English are produced with vibration of the vocal folds. You can get vowels that are produced without that in other languages, but pretty much 99% of the time, vowels are going to be produced with vocal fold vibration. The epiglottis is not too important for us. However, the velum and the nasal cavity versus the oral cavity, that is very important. In French, we have nasal vowels. In English, we don't. So if you're going to take a word like land and pronounce it in a French way, land, that is going to be incomprehensible to an English speaker who doesn't speak French. And honestly, even an English speaker who does speak French, if they're not thinking like, oh, okay, so now I have to translate this sound into a French spelling and then back into an English word, that's going to be hard for them to understand. So even though you might think, oh, well, when I hear certain accents, it sounds very nasally. It sounds like there's lots of resonance in the nasal cavity. Yes, maybe, but there are no actual nasal vowels. All of the vowels are oral. So this velum here should be closed when we are producing vowel sounds. Okay, hard palate, alveolar ridge, teeth, not super important for vowels. However, the lips are extremely important. There are three major shapes of the lips that you're going to make with vowel sounds. Number one is rounded for vowels like O. Number two is sort of open and relaxed for vowels like A. And number three is stretched out to the side for vowels like E. Okay, so you want to be moving your lips to make those sounds. That's very important. And then we have the jaw. Like I said last time for consonants, but even more so for vowels, it's very important to use your jaw. Open your jaw up. Otherwise, your tongue is not going to be able to move around enough in the back of the mouth to create those different sounds. Uh, Speaking of where you're going to move in the mouth, you see this is not a super huge space. So the more you open your jaw, the better you're going to be able to create these back open vowels. And those are very important. There are lots to have to differentiate between in English. Okay, now, before we get on to where we're going to produce all of these vowel sounds, I just want to talk to you a little bit about sound waves. Basically, when we produce sound, we've got air in our lungs that we force through our vocal tract, we vibrate our vocal folds, and then it comes out as a vowel sound that we can recognize or not. But what is it that makes all of these vowel sounds different? Well, your sound wave, when it comes out, it does have a fundamental frequency, which is the speed, essentially, at which your vocal folds are vibrating. So, for example, if I vibrate my vocal folds very slowly, I get a lower pitch, right? A lower frequency, like ah. And then if I go faster, I can get a higher pitch, like ah. But that fundamental frequency is not going to change the actual vowel sound. That's why, a baby and a very deep voiced adult, well, maybe not a baby, but like a toddler, and a very deep voiced adult can still speak the same language, right? Even though they're speaking at very different pitches, we recognize that the vowel sounds are the same. That's also why in tonal languages like Mandarin and Yoruba, you can have um, fundamental frequency changes even on a single vowel, but the sound of the vowel stays the same, right? So ah is the same vowel as ah, but the fundamental frequency is different. And so in a language like Mandarin, if you say ma and if you say ma, those are two different words. Thankfully, English is not a tonal language, so I don't have to explain tones to you today. However, what I do have to explain to you is the other frequencies within that sound wave. So you've got your fundamental frequency, but then you've got the other harmonics. Essentially, there are multiple frequencies within the sound wave, and some of these are going to be amplified by the shape of your vocal tract, the constrictions that you put in it. So we've got two things that we can really constrict for the oral cavity. That's the space within the oral cavity where the tongue is, and then at the front with the lips. So what you can see here is that when we put the tongue towards the front of the mouth and high up, and we stretch the lips wide, we get this E sound. We've got our first formant. A formant is a frequency, but just in like speech science, like in phonetics. So you've got your fundamental frequency, which is, they've set it at 0 here. And then you've got your first formant, which is, fairly low. Your second formant is way, way higher, at a way higher frequency. And then the third formant comes just after it. So these are the frequencies that are being amplified, the ones that are the loudest, and so the ones that we hear, and that makes the sound E. But then if we make it a sound R, we notice that our first formant is much higher. Our second formant comes just right after it, and our third formant is at about the same place as a third formant for E. The important thing to note here is the relationship between the formants. And over here we have oo, so our first formant is, between these two. Then you've got the second formant in roughly the same place as R, and then the third is slightly lower. What changes which formants are amplified are whether our tongue is back or front in the mouth, whether it's close to the alveolar ridge or open, and whether our lips are more rounded or more widely spread. And there's interactions between all of these three things. And of course, here you'll notice, 3 of these formants, but there are others, right? And actually, you probably don't even need the third formant to really distinguish between vowels. If you cut off the higher frequencies of a recording, you can still understand what a person is saying, and that's how we have telephone technology. We don't hear all of the frequencies, but we don't really need the top ones. It's not too important. So that's just a little bit of background. Now, why am I telling you about this? Because when we look at the space within the mouth, we can actually calculate based on the formants. So this is formant 1 starting from 200 hertz going up to 900 hertz, and this is formant 2 starting from 500 hertz to 2300 hertz. We can sort of calculate where the tongue is going to be to produce all of these. So, for E, for example, we know that we have a very low formant 1 and a very high formant 2. That's what we've got here, yeah? And then we plot them on this graph and we see that that's over there. Whereas with oo, we've got relatively low, sorry, let me go back. We've got relatively low formants for both of these. And so we end up here. Now, what I do just want to say is that, again, the most important thing is not the exact hertz that these frequencies are vibrating at. It's more about the relationship between them. And even for one speaker speaking in a very consistent accent, you are not going to get exactly the same frequencies every single time. So there's a bit of movement happening here. And also, this formant plot is not taken from the same speaker as these spectrograms. So they don't match up exactly, and that's normal. That's totally fine. Okay, now that's the theory. What about the practice? So here we have, I believe, 17 of the 20 or so English vowels. Just to note, English is a language that has a lot of vowels, relatively speaking. A lot of languages have between 5 and 10 vowels, and honestly, that's all you need. You know, but English is out there with like 20 different vowel sounds. So no wonder that it's difficult to learn English vowel sounds. And when you combine that with an extremely unpredictable spelling system, that the orthography, the way that we write these vowels with letters, you can understand why people have a hard time with them. And for French speakers who are learning English, there's a sort of added level of complexity where 60% of English words come either directly from French, it's about half of them, 30% total, and the other 30% come from Latin. So you might be reading something and think, I know how to pronounce that word because it looks the same when it's written in my language, French, but it's not pronounced the same. Okay, and that's because of several historic processes, most notably the Great Vowel Shift. So this was a phenomenon that happened over a period of about 400 years between the 1400s and the 1800s, where people just started shifting their pronunciation, likely due to interactions with other languages and other varieties of English, but nobody can say like 100%, with 100% certainty exactly what caused it. But that does explain why we get words today that look exactly the same in English but are spelled completely differently. And I'm going to go through a few of those as we go through this vowel chart. And as I'm looking at it, I can see that I have left a typo. Bear with me for 1 second. All right, and we're back in. So now that I've corrected the typo, right, let's start with our front and close vowel, E. E. As you can see, I've put in this E in a sort of long rectangular shape to give you the idea that it should be pronounced with your lips stretched quite wide. E. The other thing that you'll note here that's very important is this little symbol. These two triangles are sort of facing each other that look a little bit like a colon. That is our length symbol in vowels. So English has short vowels and long vowels. And there is an important distinction between the two. Let me show you. Just underneath this E for green tea, we have the I of silver pin. So there are two differences between E and I. Number one is that although they are both front vowels, E is close and I is close mid. So our jaw is slightly more open and our tongue is lower. E, I, E, I, E, I. You should be able to see a very small movement of my tongue and my jaw. The second difference, of course, is this length marker. E is long, I is short. I wouldn't say pin, all right, but I wouldn't say T. Now, The problem that French speakers who are learning English have is that the French I has features of both of these vowels. And French speakers will often use the French I as a replacement for either of these vowels, which means that we get into some sticky situations where it's impossible for an English speaker who does not speak French, or even sometimes even English speakers who do speak French, it's impossible for them to understand what word you're trying to say. The classic example is, of course, a student who will ask for a sheet of paper. I want a sheet of paper, or give me a sheet of paper, please. Now, is that person saying sheet, as in S-H-E-E-T, or is that person saying shit, as in feces? Well, it's hard to know with that accent. So, something that I teach all my French-speaking students is when you think of this I in silver pin, try to pronounce the French E accent aigu, the E with an acute accent. I, right? That's that French I. And then the English I is pretty much exactly the same. All right, there might be a slight difference, but they're truly pronounced and produced in pretty much the same location. So with silver pin, you want to think of the E accent aigu, and with green tea, you want to think of your French E, but you want to make it longer. Maybe imagine the letter I with the letter Y after it. E. You know, really make that long. E. Or, for example, the E in fee, right? Fee. That would be close to the English word fee, which is F-E-E, and which uses that long E vowel. Okay, so there will be another video on the E-I distinction and lots of exercises for you to do. So let's move on to our next vowel, which is E. So this is a front vowel, it's open mid, so at this point we're opening our jaw quite a lot, and it's short, E. So this is just like the E accent grave, E with a grave accent in French. Not too difficult. But what I will say is if we look at the example, red bread, notice that bread, this EA digraph, so this combination of two written letters, turns up in a lot of other vowel sounds, which we will see later. Okay, so just because you see E and A together does not mean that the sound is necessarily eh, and you do have to check in a dictionary for this digraph. All right, and finally, the last of our front vowels is A, with black cat. So if we go from the top, E, I, A. You could just see my jaw opening, my tongue lowering as we go through those. All right, moving into the central vowels. First of all, I'm going to treat this one here. This is our schwa vowel. I haven't given an example for this, but we can see it in a few things. For example, the of silver, it's in there. The ud of mustard, it's in there. The ul of purple, it's in there. And this schwa sound, if you remember from our stress and syllable homework, is the sound that you get in a lot of unstressed vowels. And it's splat bang in the middle. It's what happens when you just lightly relax your mouth and just go, there you go. That's the schwa vowel. And then underneath it, we have uh, uh. So this one is a long vowel, okay, just like E, and so it's central, it's open mid. So if you say uh, eh, you should be able to feel your tongue moving slightly back. Also, what I notice personally is that my lips get more relaxed, right? With they're a little bit stretched out. With it's very relaxed. And the example is purple shirt. Now, this difference here we have a sort of central and close mid rounded vowel, and it's short, U. And here we have a sort of central, back, close, rounded, long vowel, U. So let's first of all compare this U, this English U, to the French OU. So OU is a short vowel because in French there are no long short distinctions. And if you go between OU, 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 for me the French OU is further back in the mouth, right? And the English OU is a little bit more forward, a little bit more central. Does it matter if you pronounce your OU as OU? It's going to sound a little bit weird, but it shouldn't be any barrier to comprehension. So honestly, that's not a big deal. However, what is a big deal is confusing U and U. You really do have to learn the difference between them and learn which words are pronounced with this U sound. So if we try and do it together, you want to be quite relaxed, round your lips, and then put your tongue towards the center and a little bit towards the top of the mouth, but not too much. Ooh, ooh. And this is the vowel that we're going to have in words like look, book, took, good, could, should, would, put. Can't think of any others right now, but there will be many other examples. So, ooh, 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 ooh. Very important to distinguish those. And finally, let's have go back. Let's have a look at these back vowels. So first of all, we've got the of mustard cup. And this one is honestly not too difficult. Everybody knows how to say cup. I've never met a person learning English who didn't already know how to say cup for some reason. So if you can say cup, you've got this vowel. And some people say, oh, I can't hear the difference between the and of the schwa. There's not a lot of difference. They are quite close. I would say with your mouth is a little bit open, your lips are a little bit stretched further, and the schwa is really extremely relaxed. Then our other open mid back vowel. This time it's rounded and it's also long. This is or, as in orchid wall. Or. Now, my French speaking students often have trouble with this because they want to say the French O. But the French O is actually more up here. It's a close mid back vowel, whereas or is open mid. It is lower. Over here, we can see this is the French O and this is the English or. You know, obviously in this person's particular format charts. But what I would say if you're having trouble with this is take your fingers, put them on the sides of your mouth, and when you're producing the vowel, push your fingers in until they go between your top and bottom sets of teeth, like this. Or, or. And it's gonna look silly, but it works. And so generally what the problem that my French students have is that they don't want to open their jaws as much as they need to, and you really just do have to. You have to open your jaw completely and say or, like this, and that trick just gets you to open the jaw a little bit more. Okay, jaw, by the way, that's the same sound, jaw. All right, moving down to our open back vowels. So this one's pretty easy. This is R. You can see that it is unrounded, that it is a long vowel. And here we have a carmine heart. I didn't know that this color was carmine, but here we go. You learn something new every day. So this one, pretty simple. And then we have O, which is a short vowel. O, it's rounded, it's back, it's open. Orange, sock. This is also the vowel that you hear in hot, okay? And pretty much everybody can say hot. So if you've got the word hot, you know how to say O. Now, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right. So these are the 12 monophthongs of English. Mono means one, thong means sound. But we also have diphthongs, and we have 7 of those. Diphthongs, di is 2, phthong, sound. So, diphthongs are what happens when you begin with one vowel and you move to a second vowel. And we don't have that in French, which is why it can be very, very tricky for French speakers to learn English diphthongs. Without further ado, let's have a look at them. So I'm going to start off with the I diphthongs, i.e. the diphthongs that end in I. And as you hear this, you're going to hear that, it says that they end in I, but it sounds like they end in E. In this case, it doesn't really matter. So let me show you what I mean. Let's begin with turquoise toy. So we start with or, and then we go oi, oi, oi. Okay, that's the diphthong, oi. Over here we have grey day, a. So we begin with e, and we end in I or e. A, a, a. And then if we start a little bit lower, we begin with a, although to be completely honest, I think it's more like beginning with r. But anyway, we have white tie, I. And again, I would say that's more of an r. I. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why did why are you using the wrong symbols, Jan, if you're saying that we start in a different place and end up in a different place? Because these are the sort of standard symbols that most English dictionaries use. But I believe, like I said, I think I wrote it in another part of the course. Each dictionary has their own symbols, and none of them truly use the International Phonetic Alphabet. But also, that's kind of normal because the International Phonetic Alphabet is made for describing phonetic realities, not phonetic ideals. And what I'm presenting to you is a sort of ideal, a fixed ideal that doesn't take into account any natural variation. And also, uh, maybe this was the case, 50, 70 years ago when the International Phonetic Alphabet was being created, but now it's not because pronunciation changes, language changes. So, beyond the symbols, what you really want to think about is the sound. All of these end in a kind of y sound. Oi, a, I. People don't usually have too much trouble with oi, like, in boy and koi and toy and all of that. French speakers often forget to make this a diphthong, this a. They'll just say eh, like a grade. Well, actually, nobody says that. But for example, in the word great, right? Sometimes I'll hear just gret. Or the word cake, right? I'll hear just cake. And in fact, there is a word in French, un cake, which is a cake, but a savory cake, whereas in English, a cake is always sweet, which just completely chops off the second part of that diphthong, right? So you really want to make sure you're getting that a in there. And people generally don't have too much of a problem with I. It's like the personal pronoun I. Okay, so those are our I diphthongs. Next, we're going to look at our U diphthongs. So these are the diphthongs that end in U. So first we have rose coat, beginning with the schwa, and ending in U. O, O, O. And this is like the letter O, rose coat. The mistake that French speakers will often make here is using the French ou instead. They'll say rose coat, but that is going to lead you into trouble if you use ou for this diphthong and for this long monophthong. And then, all of your words just sound the same, and it's really tricky to understand. So it's very important to get these two right. This or over here and this o over here. Now, the other one is, it begins with a down here, brown, house, ow, ow, ow. Okay? That one, again, is not too tricky. People usually get the hang of it. So o and ow, two very different sounds. All right, and then our final two are our schwa diphthongs. So beginning with I and ending in schwa. So ear, ear, clear beer. And as I say this, I'm thinking that's never how I say those words. I don't say clear beer. I say clear beer. So I start much higher. I start in the E over here. Clear beer. That's my variety of English. Clear beer sounds more Southern English. It also sounds a little bit posher to me. But I specifically grew up learning English in Birmingham in the Midlands, and there we do say clear beer. And then here we have the air, air diphthong, pair, stairs. And again, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking that's not exactly how I say it. I say pair, stairs. And if you're thinking, wait a second, air, air, that just sounds like air, air. That just sounds like a long air. Well, know that a lot of English pronunciation experts agree with you, and they say that we should change the symbol for this to just be a long air symbol. If you want to remember it like that, fine. But again, in most dictionaries, you're going to have this diphthong symbol. Pair, stairs. Okay. So that brings us to a total of 19 vowel sounds, which is what we have in my variety of English and in most varieties of English, but not all. Okay. So what do I want you to do now? Well, unlike with the consonants, it is pretty important for you to learn all of the symbols of these vowels just because there are so many vowel sounds and they're all so very different from most other people's native languages, whether it be French or something else. So there are exercises for you about that. And then, of course, we have some key exercises this week on the difference between E and I and U and U. And in the following weeks, we'll also have a look at a bunch of these other sounds. All right, thanks for listening, and I hope this was useful.